This is CNN Breaking News.
You are watching CNN's breaking news coverage of the U.S. and Israel-led war with Iran.
Okay, we're hearing jets overhead. There's anti-aircraft fire going up. They told us we gotta get out of here as fast as possible.
Reports of explosions around several Gulf countries. The fighting very much continues, but there's this flurry of mediation efforts going on at the same time.
U.S., Iran, and Pakistan that stepped in to try to put a ceasefire back.
Pakistan doesn't have a traditional role mediating in the Middle East. And in this case, it was the Pakistanis who were the conduit between Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and President Trump.
And at the forefront of that is Pakistan's Field Marshal, the Chief of Army Staff, General Asim Munir.
Warner breaking news, the president has officially signed the agreement with Iran while in France.
There are 3 signatures on that memorandum of understanding. One is from the United States, President Trump, Iranian president, and Pakistan's prime minister. And that's for the history books.
All right, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Meanwhile in Asia. I'm Kunal Sehgal.
And I'm Ivan Watson in Indonesia. Kunal, do you miss me?
I do. I mean, well, more than missing you, I think I'm really jealous that you're on a holiday.
Yeah, I'm on a family vacation, but I really wanted to be a part of the conversation this week because we have one of my favorite people. They're in the studio, hopefully keeping you company, our Islamabad senior producer, Sophia Saifi.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm making sure he's not having too much FOMO. Really happy to be here.
So this week, we're going to be talking about Trump's new favorite strongman, Pakistan Field Marshal Asim Munir.
He's waged war against the Taliban. He's fought with India. He's charmed the mercurial U.S. president, and he's put Pakistan at the center of this vital diplomatic moment, helping negotiate a memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran while they've been furiously at war with each other. And I think we should really take a listen to President Trump and how much praise he lavishes on General Munir.
I call him the general. He's a general. He's a great general. He's so great that he's actually a field marshal. Great general, great field marshal, a great guy.
But I want to thank the country of Pakistan and its great prime minister and its great field marshal. He's a great field marshal.
So I have to say my favorite field marshal from Pakistan.
Favorite field marshal. Now, Ivan and Sophia, you both have covered Pakistan for decades. Sophia, do you want to start with who is Field Marshal Asim Munir and why does he hold so much sway with President Trump?
I mean, I think that's the million-dollar question, Kunal. Like, who is he? I think that's what everybody's always asking. He was the head of Pakistan's intelligence services, the enigmatic ISI, and he was not really expected to become the chief of army staff. That was an unexpected appointment until a year ago when Pakistan went to war with India. But, you know, he's a man of modest means. From what we understood, he's a self-made person. He's not one of those, gentleman officers that we used to see in the 1960s, etc.
His father was a school teacher, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And so, he didn't go to the Pakistani Military Academy, which is kind of like the Sandhurst of Pakistan. He went through a different route to get into the army. So he didn't have all of the credentials or the checklist that one does have to eventually become the head of the most powerful institution in the country. And he wasn't incredibly popular until this war with India happened.
Yeah, then suddenly he bursts out with this war. But Sophia, Pakistan has this long history of the military being kind of, the power behind the throne. It is arguably the most powerful political institution in the country, and it has a long history of generals who've been very powerful, and yet this general, who has a much kind of lower profile in some ways than some of his predecessors, has somehow become President Trump's favorite guy in South Asia.
I mean, I don't think it's just in South Asia. I mean, just generally across the board, it feels like he's his favorite guy all over the world at the moment.
I mean, he seems like he portrays himself as this like global peacemaker almost now. Whenever he goes to Tehran, in DC,
and it
having
seems like
lunch
he's
with President Trump.
Absolutely. And it feels like he's actually becoming quite effective at that. If you see what's been unfolding, I mean, the biggest story in the past couple of months has been the war in West Asia, right? Pakistan's really been at the forefront of that. And at the forefront of that is Pakistan's Field Marshal, the Chief of Army Staff, and of course, Pakistan's Prime Minister. I mean,
and Sophia, I think one moment that many observers noticed was when General Munir was in the White House meeting Trump face to face some time ago and opened up this box full of rare earth minerals, much to delight in that photo of President Trump. And I think that signaled some kind of communication between these two leaders. They were connecting, it felt like.
Absolutely. And I think what we need to understand is that, yes, that photograph really went quite viral, let's say, in South Asia, per se. And it's been, the catalyst for a lot of conversations regarding critical minerals and what Pakistan has to offer, symbolically and literally. But at the same time, we do need to understand that wasn't really the first meeting that President Trump had with the Field Marshal. The Field Marshal had already had a lunch with President Trump a couple of months before that already.
Which I think is extremely rare. I mean,
it is very rare, yes.
For a Pakistani general, not a head of state, to have a lunch with President Trump at the White House.
I believe it was the first time that has ever happened.
Pakistan doesn't have a traditional role mediating in the Middle East. It's other kind of Gulf countries that are usually at the table.
Exactly.
And in this case, it was the Pakistanis who were the conduit between Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and President Trump, which was almost a first, I feel like, for Pakistan.
Absolutely. And that's why it's like, it makes me wonder, like, why is it that Pakistan is at the center of this? And also, like, what is Pakistan's incentive in striking this deal or this peace plan, if you say?
I think the fact is, and I said this before, that is this like right time in history. I mean, look, when you think of Pakistan, people have often said Osama bin Laden, right? Like when I've been traveling, when I'd be like, oh, I'm from Pakistan, even if they couldn't speak English, they'd be like, oh, Osama bin Laden. But that's now shifted, and people are talking about Pakistan being in rooms where Pakistani mediators have never been before. I think it's interesting that General Asim Munir has a strong relationship with President Trump, with the United States. But at the same time, what's really interesting is that we have to understand that Pakistan has a western border with Iran. And it's not been the best relationship historically between Iran and Pakistan.
Well, just a couple of years ago, weren't there skirmishes between Pakistan and Iran?
Yeah, in early 2024. But under Field Marshal General Asim Munir, that has also changed. And at the same time, what's fascinating is that when Iran and the US went to war last year in 2025, that's really when the mediation really began. And then this year, Pakistan really took a big undertaking. And at the front of that was General Asim Munir. He went to Iran 2 times in the past couple of months since April. He had meetings with all of the different parties involved in Iran as well. So when we talk about his relationship with President Trump, I think it's very interesting to kind of see what his relationship with the Iranians as well as the Saudis.
And Pakistan has a mutual defense treaty with Saudi Arabia.
Exactly that. That's right.
So when the Iranians are firing rockets and drones at Saudi Arabia, that raises the specter of Pakistan having to jump into the fray to defend its ally.
You've covered this from the ground, from day one. I just want to take a step back. The first time when there were actually serious face-to-face negotiations between the U.S. delegation and the Iranians, you were in Islamabad then. I feel like I just want to give our audiences a taste of what was that like, because it was quite dramatic, wasn't it? There was a lockdown, a public holiday declared.
Yes, there was a lockdown. The main avenue leading into the red zone where the Serena Hotel is, where the talks were actually happening. And there was a convention center right opposite where Ivan and I have also done live hits before. That shut down, that entire area shut down. And I think is really interesting because when you think of like places where history is made. This was the first time since 1979 that senior Iranian and American officials met face to face. And that happened in Pakistan, not in some European country, which has traditionally been the case, or in a Gulf country. And I think that's something that Pakistanis take a lot of pride in. And you could see that just with the information ministry officials who were there with us. They were bringing biscuits and tea for us, or the coffee that was available free for everybody had Islamabad talks on the cute plastic mugs as well. So
they went all out.
They went really all out. And Ivan, you were in Pakistan when, the first kind of information about a memorandum, those words, right? A memorandum of understanding. That's when it first came out, if you remember. And so this has been a long time coming. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we do know that even when technical talks are ongoing, however they happen, Pakistan is still going to be involved in it. There are 3 signatures on that memorandum of understanding. One is from the United States, President Trump, Iranian president, and Pakistan's prime minister. And that's for the history books.
Kunal, I covered a round of this with Sophia, and Islamabad is this political administrative capital, but there was a sense of giddiness among the Pakistani officials that we would meet with and talk to, this excitement at being at the center of this high-stakes diplomacy, and also not being a direct part of the conflict, because, Pakistan has been involved in conflicts for decades internally and on its borders. And here it was kind of helping make peace instead of, suffering damage and casualties.
I found it interesting that there's a lot of excitement on the ground, like you said, but there was also a lot of excitement on social media. My Instagram was full of Pakistani nationals kind of flouting their Pakistani passport, being we have arrived now, guys. We're at the center of this. I mean, there was a lot, people were really proud of this.
Yeah, and they still are. And, it's worked out that, the thing that we're discussing here is at the forefront of all of that has been this field marshal, right? But at the same time, we're going back to why Pakistan is doing this, right? And one of the reasons is that, Pakistan's economy has been suffering. And when you have a war, another war, because let's not forget, Pakistan is at war with Afghanistan, which is one of the 2 countries that make up its western border. And then you had another war at the same time, simultaneously happening. And Pakistan is, of course, affected, like every other country, with the Straits of Hormuz being completely locked down. We've had power blackouts in the capital city, which is very unusual. Fuel prices have risen exponentially. Schools were closed for a much longer period of time. There was a work from home period set up for government officials as well to conserve energy and fuel.
It's had a huge impact on Asia, but also all around the world. So we were talking about this the other day, right? When you went to the US recently, and you had this kind of this shock that a country that is currently raging war and
I think
everything is normal to you, but closer to home.
Yeah, it was very jarring because, I had the best holiday. It was a great time. But at the same time, sure, there was an increase in prices of things. But at the same time, it just was kind of jarring because it felt like they weren't really as directly affected by that war as people in this region. Right? In Western South Asia and beyond, there's been a very dramatic, very tangible kind of effect because of that war.
Sophia, we've talked about what the Americans think about Munir and what the Iranians think about Munir, but what do actually normal Pakistanis living in the country think about this strongman?
I think at the moment, there is a lot of support for the field marshal, and because of the kind of elation and hope there is. But at the same time, you do have, a former prime minister who's been imprisoned for coming up to 3 years right now. So there is a lot of conversation about human rights, about the freedom of speech. What does this mean for the future of the country? I think Pakistan is unique in the way that its strongest institution is the military. So the question is that, one day, if this field marshal moves on, right? And, changes, etc. What next?
You guys, you can't really have a conversation about the military and military leadership in Pakistan without also addressing Pakistan's arch rival, India. So how is the Indian government looking at this romance between Trump and Asim Munir, especially when you consider that during Trump's first term in office, the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, he seemed to be the object of Trump's affections?
It's really interesting because there is a lot of chatter in India about whether India is being sidelined by the US. But I feel like we have to kind of put it in context and go back to last year when there was the India-Pakistan conflict. And during the conflict, President Trump got involved and he claimed credit for ending this conflict.
We stopped them from going to war with India. You would have had a nuclear war if it wasn't for me.
Pakistan quickly endorsed Trump's positioning and said, yes, he is the reason why this conflict stopped. But India was furious. They were denying all of this. They were insisting this was a decision made by Pakistan and India. It was a bilateral decision. So they were pissed off by Trump because of that. And then following that, there was these Liberation Day tariffs and then the visas issue for Indian workers. So you have to take all of that into account, that India already was feeling quite sour. And some people believe that, yes, India should have taken a more active role in mediating this because it does have close relationships with Iran as well. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, people believe that, because this administration is so unpredictable, it's better to have a quiet diplomacy and not really be like at the center of it. Because what if something goes wrong?
I think the view from Islamabad is that for once, and India has always had soft power. You've got Bollywood, you've got the glam, the glitz, and Pakistan really hasn't been able to sell itself in the way that India has. Ever since the two countries were partitioned into separate independent states. I think in this case, what's giving Pakistanis a lot of pride is, for once, it's actually won the war. I mean, whatever happened on the battlefield is what it is. But in terms of the war of narratives, Pakistanis feel that, hey, we won. We won the war of narratives against incredible India. Whoa, bro, that's amazing. That's a pretty big deal here, basically. Here as in, not Hong Kong, but in Islamabad.
But I do think that history offers a warning to the Pakistani government and leadership. There have been times where the US and Pakistan have been aligned, have worked together very closely, and then they've been on the outs with each other very abruptly. And there must be some voices in Pakistan saying, hey, let's be a little careful here because we've been burned before when the friendship suddenly cools.
Absolutely. There are voices. There are many, many voices who have been saying this perhaps even before, this bromance with President Trump even really began to become what it did. And they will continue to be critical of this, whatever happens with Iran, right? Pakistan is in a very interesting neighborhood with India, China, Iran, and Afghanistan. So we're just going to have to wait and see how things unfold. The United States is quite far away. Romances end, breakups happen, but you still got to go on. You listen to the sad songs, but you're just going to have to see what happens for the fate of the millions of people who live in Pakistan and in India and beyond.
Look, Sophia, it's been great having you here. Thank you so much for talking about this. Well, we'll continue to come to you for any more updates. But meanwhile, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, guys. It's been great.
Thanks, Sophia.
Thanks.
That was really awesome getting to talk to Sophia. I have the privilege, Kunal, I get to go to India, to Pakistan with journalist visas to report on these two massive and complicated countries. But you don't have that luxury, do you?
No, I don't. And that's why sometimes I do get FOMO because as an Indian national, it's really, really difficult to get a visa for Pakistan because we're not on the best of terms. Which is why, every time I feel like when I speak to Sophia, and it's been amazing to have her here in Hong Kong, is to just not just only talk about Pakistan and geopolitics, but also like the people. It's just really interesting to know what people in Pakistan think, because I don't get a lot of that kind of nuance and that opinion when I'm in India or in the Indian media.
Before we go, Kunal, I want to highlight that you and Sophia and our colleagues had a really big night last night. You guys won an award for your coverage of the deadly days of fighting between India and Pakistan recently.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was great for the team to be recognized for all the hard work they've put in for such an important story.
And this is an award for excellence in breaking news coming from the Society of Publishers in Asia. So congratulations to all of you guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And am I going to see you next week in the studio, or are you still on holiday?
Yeah, my vacation's sadly going to be coming to an end, but I look forward to joining you for the next episode.
All right, then. Well, that's all we have for this week. Please tune in for Meanwhile in Asia next week with me and Ivan.
All right. Bye-bye.